Hi, I'm Wayne Hoffman. I'm president of Idaho Freedom Foundation. I want to take just a minute to break down some of the comments that were made at the gubernatorial debate recently. And in this particular segment, we want to take a look at the comments that were made about tax policy. Now, what you're about to watch gets kind of wonky. So I'm going to break it down for you in a way I hope that is meaningful and will make a lot of sense. But this is one of the most important policies that we work on here at IFF, because ultimately every dollar that the government takes from you is money that you don't have to spend for your own needs, for your health care, for your automobile repairs, for your kids, to save for your future. So let's go ahead and take a look.
For the candidates, the state income tax, the state sales tax has increased from 3% in 1965 to 6% now. As governor, what would your role be in either increasing or decreasing the state sales tax?
Candidate Raul Labrador, I think the first response is yours.
Well, did you mean the sales tax or the income tax? Okay, so what my plan is, like I said earlier, is 555.
Now, to put that in context, what Labrador has been saying is he wants to reduce sales tax, income tax, and individual income tax and corporate taxes to 5%. Sales tax is at 6% right now. The individual and corporate rates are just under 7% now with the legislation that was passed in this last legislative session.
I want to reduce the corporate tax to 5%, the individual income tax to 5%, and the sales tax to 5%. I want to get rid of all the loopholes that are in the tax code. I was a business owner. I owned my own business for 10 years. At one point, it wasn't a huge business. I had 8 employees, and I had to pay for the taxes. I had to pay for their insurance. I had to pay for their benefits. I know what it's like to be a small business owner and to decide every single day whether you're going to pay yourself first or whether you're going to pay somebody else first. I think it's important that the money be in your pocket, not in the pocket of the government. We don't know how to invest. We don't know how to spend money. We want you, as citizens of Idaho, to invest the money and to spend the money. I think we need the smallest hand of government possible, and we can do that by making sure that we lower taxes and we lower regulations.
There's nothing wrong necessarily with a plan that cuts taxes to 5% across the board. Here's the problem that we have, though, is that if you really want to supercharge the state's economy, what you should do is you get rid of income tax. And that's something I would like to hear candidates for governor really talk about, which is how do you avoid the trap that we're in right now, where we're stealing money from people in order to pay for things that don't belong to them. And that's being done through the income tax. We're truly taxing people's productivity and their ingenuity and their risk. If you want to invest money in something and then you end up receiving a benefit out of that, then the government goes ahead and tax that based on you having put your capital at risk. So 555 sounds interesting. I guess it fits on a bumper sticker, but really I would say it needs to be a little more ambitious if we're going to really supercharge the state's economy.
Mr. Little?
The sales tax is obviously, when they talk about loopholes, when the sales tax was passed, that 3%, there was a broad class of taxes, of taxpayers that didn't pay. It was supposed to be a retail sales tax where it was only taxed one time. A lot of the loopholes that are talked about are definition of what that original intent was. Because remember in 1965 when we did that, we took out the inventory tax, we lowered the other taxes. Right now in the state of Idaho, there are a lot of sales tax exemptions. It's going to be much easier to stop the hemorrhaging and stop the exemptions than it is to repeal all of them. Because a lot of decisions have been made by businesses predicated on these are the rules that are out there. What government shouldn't do is move the rules back and forth so that people make their decisions, whether it's a car dealer, whether it's a small retailer. We are going to make progress in sales tax. This year,
there's no question that government shouldn't change the rules back and forth. That's fundamentally correct. However, if the rules are wrong, they ought to be changed. And the rules right now are really wrong. The rules are slanted towards some businesses against others. And there are sales tax exemptions that benefit certain businesses at the expense of others. So those cronyist tax breaks, and by the way, most of those exemptions, most of the place where the tax code really picks winners and losers isn't in the sales tax code, it's actually in the income tax code.
Reach out and grab some of those taxes that have been being avoided in Idaho but you have to lower the cost of government.
Right. What he's talking about is the legislature passed a bill last legislative session that allows for the state to collect revenue off of internet sales. And that's something that we've been fighting for years. People talk about it as being some kind of a benefit to the brick and mortar stores. It's really not, because ultimately what happens is those same brick and mortar stores are now having to answer to tax regulators in other states. And the only real beneficiary of this scheme are the people in government, because they collect more revenue.
But you still have to pay for our fundamental services. Primarily, the number one is public schools. I believe that if we stop the hemorrhaging and stop new exemptions and continue to grow the government, then we'll have room to bring those profits.
Did he just say continue to grow the government? Okay.
Or those sales taxes down.
Mr. Alquist.
Just Saturday, last Saturday, I can't believe it's only a week ago, I was with Leo and Becky, that own a welding shop over in Rexburg, and he grabbed me before I left at the end of the night and said, please, please, please don't forget me. And please don't forget that the government has one source of revenue, and that is us. It is about taxes, and we need to get them down in this state to be competitive. But remember, there's one source of revenue, and it's us, and the way they spend our money needs a fresh look. There are agencies in this state that have not had a fresh look at how they spend your tax dollars for years. It is time to look at those budgets. Every single Monday in the real world, we have an executive team meeting where we come together, and it's not only what revenue comes in, but it's how does that revenue go out. And we have to take a fresh look at how we spend those dollars so that we can reduce the tax burden on our good people. That's what drives an economy. That's what will make us have wages go up in this state. But we've got to remember those small business owners and the people that are paying the taxes instead of just the history of spending these taxes. We have a spending problem in Idaho. We'll fix it.
There is a spending problem in Idaho, and in fact, if you take a look at the budget in 2011 was $2.3 billion. Now it's almost $4 billion, and he's correct that we're not taking a fresh look at the budget year after year. What generally happens is the legislature looks at what was spent last year, authorizes that spending to take place again, and then adds to it. And that's why you end up with out-of-control government and high taxes. There is one issue that I would take a quibble with him, which is, yes, small businesses are really, really important. But when government makes a distinction and says small business is better than big business and big business is worse than small business, that's a real problem. What we ought to do is we ought to treat everybody the same. We shouldn't make a distinction because you have 2 employees, 20 employees, or 200 employees. Everybody has the same playbook. Everyone is on a level playing field, and then you have true fairness in tax policy.
Mr. Labrador, 30 seconds.
So one of the exemptions that we have in the tax code is that we're inviting companies to come to Idaho and we're giving them tax money. When we give them that tax money, where's that tax money coming from? That's coming from you, from our pockets. That bringing a new company to Idaho, and we decide to give them extra money. Many of those companies are actually competing with our existing businesses. I want to get rid of that. I don't think the governor or the legislature should decide who the winners and the losers are in the tax system. I believe that everyone should be treated the same. I believe when a governor's office and a legislature treats everybody the same, the economy will grow, the economy will thrive, and everyone will feel better about their government. Right now we have businesses leaving the state because they're not able to receive exemptions in the state, so they're going to other states because they can receive exemptions.
Thank you very much.
There are also businesses leaving the state who have gotten exemptions, who have been treated well. In fact, there are businesses who have gotten special benefits from the state that have gone out of business. Here's the thing, about 4 years ago, the legislature passed a bill that allowed for the state to provide basically tax forgiveness, a big tax break to businesses that employ a certain number of employees in urban areas and rural areas. You have to cross a certain threshold and you have to offer certain wages and certain benefits. And the government sits in judgment over whether you're entitled to receive that break or not. It's a real, real problem because you have businesses that have grown organically in our state and they're left out because they're not growing at a rate that's deemed acceptable by the state government. And that's a real tragedy.
Mr. Little.
Well, something's working, or Idaho wouldn't be the fastest growing state. Idaho wouldn't be a state with the most increase of incomes of any of the other states.
Bear in mind that Idaho's income is extraordinarily low. We're one of the lowest paid states in the country, and that's a function of a very progressive tax and regulatory policy. And by progressive, I don't mean that in a positive way. We actually tax people too much and we regulate too much. And as a result of that, wages are low. So when he says we're the fastest growing state, fastest growing wages, we're still near the bottom. And that's unfortunate.
You continually have to look at government spending and tax policy, always rejuvenating. You have to adapt to what happens at the federal level. You have to be competitive with what's taking place in the surrounding states. The program that exists in Idaho doesn't give them your tax dollars. It negates some of what they would have paid.
Yes, it does. It totally gives our tax dollars to businesses. The way that works is because of the fact that so much tax revenue is being given away to businesses, what you're finding is that your top marginal rate is higher than it needs to be. Your sales tax is higher than it needs to be. Your property taxes are higher than they need to be because we're giving money away. So yes, that does have an impact on the amount you pay in taxes across the board.
We do that to be competitive in the state of Idaho. That is part of what we do. That's part of the recipe for our incredible growth of personal incomes, is the fact that we are competitive. We don't give them your money. We let them keep a little more of their own as incentive. But
how come only some businesses get to keep some of their own money? I mean, I invest quite a bit. I employ 6 people here in the state of Idaho. I don't get some kind of special benefit from the state. I still pay sales tax. I still pay income tax. I still do all that. Why is it that Brad Little and the state of Idaho gets to decide who receives a break? And that's just not fair, and that's the problem.
Only way they get that is if they raise the level of wages in their community.
Thank you very much.
Do you hear what he just said? They only get that if they do certain things. So the government controls whether or not they pay enough or they don't pay enough, or they provide enough benefits or not. That's a real problem. When the government sits in judgment of business and says, here's how much you should pay and here's how much you shouldn't pay, here's what your benefits should be and shouldn't be, that is centralized socialistic control over the economy, period. I hate to say it, in such blunt terms, but it really is. The government is deciding what works and what doesn't work in the economy and then penalizes people for bad behavior. Well, what the government deems to be bad behavior.
Standard, if they raise wages.
Mr. Alquist.
Let's be very clear on actual data and what's going on. We are the fastest growing, but it's because we've gone from 44th to 41st.
Yeah, there you go.
There is a long ways for us to go in this state. 1/3 of Idaho lives in poverty or paycheck to paycheck. We have a wage problem. That wage problem will start with a foundation of education that is actually modernized, and it will depend on tax policy and a strategy from the executive branch of government that actually is a multi-year strategy to get us where we want to go for our families in this state. It is time now to take a look at all of that because it's simply not good. The status quo, again, it may be good enough for government. It is not good enough for our people.
There really is a status quo mentality in the state, and there really hasn't been some kind of overarching tax policy. Where is it we're trying to go? For the last 12 or so years, it's always been, well, maybe we'll cut income taxes here and there when we can. All right, maybe we'll do something on the sales tax. We'll get rid of the sales tax on groceries. What is the objective? The objective should be to not tax people based on their productivity. And no one is having that conversation right now. I love the fact that people are talking today about eliminating the sales tax on groceries. If you're a conservative state and you can't balance a budget without taxing people based on the food they eat, you ain't doing something right. And similarly, if you're taxing people on their income at a rate that's higher than all the other states around you, and you claim to be conservative, you ain't doing something right. So the conversation's really robust, but here's the takeaway I want to leave you with. We're talking about really the future of the state. Are we going to have a state that encourages economic development, encourages economic opportunity, and stops penalizing people when they provide both? Or are we going to have a state that continues to sit at the bottom of the barrel? We need to have a tax policy in Idaho that doesn't take so darn much out of people's pockets. And at least there's a robust discussion taking place this election cycle. I encourage you to learn more about the candidates for governor. If you have more questions about our public policies, the things we work on, the way we try to improve the lives of ordinary Idahoans, look us up. We're at idahofreedom.org.